Reviews don't matter. At least, not in the way most people think. Since the dawn of humankind, when our ancestors first discovered the killing power of rock and bone, blood has been spilled in the name of everything, but mostly for the same reason. Me thoughts better than your thoughts. And that tradition has only continued nowadays with the dawn of the internet and social media. Wars are raged constantly, all because, I don't know, some guy really didn't like Last of Us. I don't know. Making a video on this topic might seem a bit redundant to some, and I can totally get that. Most of what Dunkies said back 6 years ago holds up today and perfectly sums up how I feel about the subject. But at the same time, there's one thing that's always stuck out in that video thinking about all these years later. And while I'm sure this isn't a new issue, to me it certainly seems like a more prevalent one in current day. One of the main points Dunk made throughout that video was regarding the consistency of a critic's voice, and how it's hard to really trust the word of centralized professional outlets like IGN for just how it's a group of people with different tastes and opinions. In comparison, content creators usually do a better job in terms of being trustworthy with what they say, since it's usually just one person and they are consistent with what they say and in turn are more worth listening to.
When you see a video from Pro Jared or Total Biscuit or Angry Joe, you know exactly whose point of view it's coming from. Now pick a review from IGN, you have just entered the fucking lottery.
But what happens when a reviewer actually pushes against the grain a little bit and doesn't follow the common opinion? Let's talk about this guy for a moment. I discovered Under the Mayo's channel back around early 2020, like many others, from his piece on Doom Eternal's Marauder, and just how great he is as an addition to the game's enemy roster. And it honestly just made me appreciate the enemy even more than I did already. Before, I liked his addition and the challenge he put up, but his video really got me to think about him from a different point of view, opened me up to new ways of how to handle him, and just really liked the enemy even more than I did prior. But what happens once you get a big hit that explodes in the YouTube algorithm? You get requests for games that are similar, and you should hopefully enjoy them. First, it was small. Titanfall 2's campaign is okay, actually. Alright, I guess I can let that slide. He didn't like Tag 2 at launch and put the community at war for a week. What a dick. He doesn't like Ultra Kill all that much. What an idiot. But then, this sick, degenerate fuck didn't like Halo Infinite or Deathloop. That's where I draw the line. This man is a menace and must be stopped by the covenant of true gaming opinions. I'll be completely honest here, I was on the side of people who relentlessly hated and shat on this dude for the longest time. I thought he deserved it, and of course, kept spreading the famous idea that he wants every game to be Doom Eternal, because that's all he ever liked apparently. He was an insane elitist that needed to be silenced. Hell, even in my first video I have a jab against him. But then, time passes. I chill out, mellow myself, expose myself towards more games. And then, randomly, one day, I decide to rewatch those videos that made me so enraged all that time ago. And I think back on those games he criticized and what I really thought of them. And I realized something. Oh no. I actually agree with this guy more than I thought I did. And I fucking attacked him for it. I feel like everyone has this bias towards something we just bought or were excited for, because the last thing we want is for the thing we spent our hard-earned money on to be bad or fail. I think we've all had that sort of honeymoon phase with a game or movie or album, where we see it as this perfect thing that is indeed holier than thou, and anyone who simply even gives a minor criticism is a hater who must be silenced. Hell, it doesn't have to be anything recent. I feel we all have that one piece of media that we hold on to with all our might as our absolute favorite, and can't fathom the idea of someone disliking it or the idea that it has any kind of flaw whatsoever. Because we're wired as humans to trust with our eyes and ears. Our own experience is the only true one in our minds, and anyone who doesn't follow that same experience is just wrong or bad faith, when that's not the case whatsoever. I honestly began to feel a little bad looking back, because I realized all I was doing by getting upset all the time at someone for just not liking something as much as I did was just being immature and closed-minded, and in turn further encouraging a hive mind of toxic positivity that harassed people simply for not thinking the same as them, all for something as benign as liking or disliking a video game. And look, before you decide to write your paragraph-long comment calling me a Mayo dick sucker, let me make it clear that not only do I still disagree with him on some things, but he isn't perfect either, and he has fully admitted to some of his earlier videos not exactly being up to par in terms of how he executed his critiques. And that is all okay. Our first videos we ever make are some of our most flawed work, and the best we can do is only improve with time. And I'm not trying to say either that you aren't allowed to disagree with people on certain takes or think they're just bad. That's natural, and even I have that sometimes. But you should still be a normal person about it. I think G-Man's review of Evil West was incredibly misguided, and he missed the point hard. It wasn't meant to be groundbreaking or anything new, just a fun, schlocky time. But the thing is, I don't make hour-long Leafy Clone commentary videos yelling after every sentence for simply not thinking the same as me. There's this argument that reviews like these can hurt the game, and I totally buy that. Less so with creators, but more with professional outlets, although I don't think G-Man's review even helped this game out in the long run. I really feel it deserved better than to just be upbanned and do a middling Metacritic score. Again, I get it. We want games to succeed, and to see someone just not get it frustrates you. There's people to this day that still hold that original negative IGN review of 2017's Prey against them for something most people didn't even experience when they played. Granted, again, I don't think IGN's review was the only thing that was going against Prey's success, but it certainly did some damage, even if they did update it later. But even with that, getting mad at IGN for scoring something higher than something else is inherently flawed because it's multiple people. It's not just one guy reviewing every single game, it's all different people. But again, that's an inherent flaw with the professional outlet system. No one looks at the tiny name at the top of the article. They see it as IGN's review, and honestly, it just feels so petty. Like, I'm gonna be totally real, hating on IGN is such a safe thing to do nowadays. It's almost kind of embarrassing to see people care as much as they do about it when they could either 1, just not listen, or 2, actually realize that their pattern of thinking is just as flawed as the system they're criticizing and claim quote-unquote doesn't mean anything. Like, y'all ever watch that How to Be a Good Game Reviewer video? That sums up how dumb this discourse consistently is perfectly.
You're criticizing the game. This is not a proper review.
For people who say that game journalists don't matter and shouldn't be given attention, you sure give them a lot of attention still. Even recently, I remember IGN gave the Fallout TV series a glowing review pre-premiere, and everywhere I looked it was nothing but, okay, because IGN likes it, it's gonna be automatically bad. And then it actually came out, and most people liked it. And the people who said that shit probably were all like, oh. Like, regardless of your own personal opinion on the show, like it or hate it, you can't deny that's kinda stupid. And even with smaller creators, I mean, Ultra Kill was already a success even before Mayo made his first video. I don't think the game is exactly losing sales just because one guy on the internet thinks the first third of the game could be a bit more challenging. You might be thinking for some reason that I'm potentially omitting something from this, but I'm not. This is literally all he says in these videos. He sung praise for Act 2 for upping the challenge. Do you understand now why I think all this backlash is fucking stupid? And that's the biggest problem with this entire situation. People not being able to differentiate what's actually bad faith versus what's actually valid criticism. Like game developers, most sane people don't want to go into something just to trash it, unless you're one of those people who thrive off of hate clicks, I guess. And I don't understand how it's so hard for people to tell either what's good or bad faith. Like Dunk says in that original video, the best reviews are the ones that are purely subjective. You can't just say what you think about something. You need to create a full case of just why you think what you do. That is good faith. When you begin to focus on shit that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, cares about.
And to dip into the schizo paint a little bit, the king being a goat man, who are the Zonai people who came from the heavens, is borderline satanic imagery. This is a result of a certain cult organization full of quote-unquote elites that are subtly inserting their propaganda into video games.
That's when you realize, okay, so this person has nothing worthwhile to say whatsoever. And then there's the argument that reviews can prevent someone from actually trying something they might enjoy, and again, I do sympathize with that. I held off on Evil West after G-Man's review, and I felt gypped once I tried it and loved it as much as I did. But at the same time, you need to admit that sometimes most rational reviews aren't far off from how a game is, and you can't blame them for that. 3D Realms came under fire a few months back over its PR manager and internal dev team shit-talking negative reviews of Phantom Fury, and ignoring the fact that this is inherently unprofessional as shit. Again, you really can't blame the audience when the game has this many obvious issues and just isn't fun to play. Nobody was trying to go into this game to hate it. Lots, and I mean lots of people were actually incredibly hyped for this game, including myself. The last thing anyone wanted was for this game to be bad. And while it is playable, that's all it is. It isn't fun. And that's what we're looking for at the end of the day. Is the game fun or not?
If it's not fun, why bother?
But you're probably wondering now, am I just not allowed to enjoy something even if it is considered a failure by basically everyone? Not at all. I've seen people enjoy Phantom Fury, and while I don't understand it in the least, I respect it. In fact, I'll dare say that people who enjoy those so-called failures might be the most fascinating to talk to. And especially years later, with the power of hindsight, something seen as a failure, while still flawed, can take on a whole new meaning. It's no secret that 2005 Shadow the Hedgehog is seen by many as not only one of the worst games of the generation, but one of the worst games in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. And I can't really blame them for it. The controls are the same slippery bullshit from Heroes, except now you have guns and there's no lock-on. Why? The level design is a confusing mess if you try to do specific objectives for endings. The story is so utterly ass that it ends up becoming an unintentional comedy for how stupid it is. This game, by all accounts, is a failure.
Damn, not here.
And yet, we're still talking about this game all these years later. Not even that, but this game has almost gotten somewhat of a resurgence in fans across the past year. Why the hell is that? Is it because the game was good all along and we were just wrong?
Your body is transmitted
not here.
Nope, but there is something utterly fascinating about analyzing Shadow, not only as a game, but its place in the overall Sonic universe, and the context it came out in. For the longest time, it was spread around by many that the only reason this game exists is because stupid idiot kids wrote to Sega asking to see Sonic with a gun. Sega listened, and now we have this. That's only partially true, actually. In reality, Shadow as a character grew a bit of a following after the release of SA2, and many Sonic fans in the early 2000s just wanted more of him, alongside a deeper expansion of his story that we really only saw the outline of in that game. A pure spin-off game focusing on Shadow and tying up all the loose ends from his introduction and reintroduction wasn't inherently a bad idea at all. The execution was certainly mixed by how, again, dumb everything is.
Doctor, you're going straight to the place you created me from.
His laboratory?
But the potential was there. But on top of that, what makes this game even more fascinating is through the lens of the state of the franchise at the time. Sega was in a weird place in the industry and in the eyes of gamers after the death of the Dreamcast, and this game, even more than any before it, was the Sonic IP trying to throw everything at the wall and seeing what would stick. Trying to branch out and gain a new audience, adapting to the direction the industry was going in. And honestly, it could have worked. Like, yeah, hindsight is 20/20 and all that, and sometimes you can't change some fans' mind on this stuff, but let's be real for a moment. Maybe those stupid kids who wrote letters were onto something, cause this shit kinda rules visually. Look at this fucking concept art. You can't tell me this ain't at least a little bit cool. This game is a giant time capsule of early 2000s Y2K nu metal edge, and not only does that give this game some interesting historical value, but again, gives this game a super interesting visual identity that's honestly pretty unique to this game. There's something oddly hypnotizing about it. We've been conditioned for so long the past few decades that this was cringe and emo actually, and bad for Sonic. But once you let go and just embrace it, there's something oddly hype about it. Like, you'll watch that intro for the first time and be all like, this is fucking stupid. Also, how do you do that with the gun? Do guns work like that? But on your 5th watch, your brain will finally turn off and be all like, can you see all of me? Walk into my mystery, step inside and hunt for dear life. Do you remember me? Capture you, set you free. I am all of me. I've grown more and more attached over these past few years to the idea of, I may be cringe, but at least I am free. Yeah, Shadow with a gun is fucking stupid, but it's still pretty cool visually. And again, that's something I just find so fascinating and honestly a little inspiring. How we're able to really speak and discuss the good parts of what's otherwise a universally panned game, and somehow convince the owners of the IP that we want more cool shit like this after being so actively ashamed of it for so many years. Sonic's PR back in 2017 would have wanted you to ignore or laugh at this stuff, but now it's realized that it doesn't need to be ashamed. We can't ever truly get rid of our mistakes, so why not embrace them? Even the worst games can have things to enjoy or appreciate about them. And while it might not make up for all their other issues, it doesn't take away not only from one's personal enjoyment, but from trying again.
I used to read reviews religiously, and I was way into the Dreamcast when it first came out. EGM gave it a 4 out of 10, which is very bad. And you think like a 4 out of 10? Cool, I will skip it. And my friend Matt, who also got in on the Dreamcast stuff, told me, yeah, man, I got Dynamite Cop, it's awesome. And I was like, what are you talking about? It got a 4. It's bad. Yes, it got a bad rating. So, playing that game back in 1999 when I was still a teenager, I get it. I get why EGM gave this a bad review. Analytically, there are so many problems with Dynamite Cop. It is not worth, the $50, $60, in 1999. However, it's still fun. It's still crazy. And that was a new idea to me. It was a new concept to me. I'm enjoying a game that EGM gave a 4? Like, what? The game kind of meant a lot to me, and I've come back to it many times over the years and been like, man, Dynamite Cop is so bad and so good and so ridiculous. I think the hot take here, Dynamite Cop is bad. It is almost objectively a bad game. However, ain't that game great? Ain't that game fun? And isn't that an interesting idea? Just philosophically, spiritually, like that idea is very fascinating to me.
And that is why, ultimately, the number or opinion or whatever at the end of a review doesn't matter, because art, at the end of the day, is what the viewer makes of it. What elicits a reaction from one can bring out a completely opposite one from another. Yes, it sucks when the game we love so much doesn't get the respect it deserves when it needs it the most, or only gets it years after the fact. But what matters at the end of the day is just showing that love in the first place. Be unashamed of what you enjoy. Push it as much as you can, because who knows, maybe one day someone will revisit that idea and make it a success.
Can you see all of me?